how we're ultimately interacting and exchanging value on the planet. Like, what are the systems? Like, what's actually going on? Sometimes you swing more on one side of the spectrum, sometimes you swing in the other. I wasn't familiar with the umbrella term impact yet back then, and I came from a background of entrepreneurship and investing and technology. So for me, I just thought this is a better paradigm for our economy and our society. I need to do something.
Not only focused on the outer part, but also the inner work and finding a way to bridge them both together to create this new earth.
But then what can make the difference is that you have that awareness of stopping and asking yourself, where am I? Am I here? And if I'm not here, why? At the end of the day, money is an energy and it's a tool. What assumptions have I made? And does it serve me or not?
Hello and welcome to the space of Conscious CoCreators. My name is Uma, and today, as always, I'm joined by Shani.
Hello, hello. Happy to be here in season 2 of Conscious CoCreators. We have a very special guest this time. We are joined by Alessa Berg from Top Tier Impact. Alessa is the founder of Top Tier Impact. It's a global network of investors for over 50 countries, I believe.
That's right. Investors, entrepreneurs, and everybody who's building a better paradigm of living.
Amazing.
So what made you feel so passionate about this new paradigm? What does it mean for you, and what does it mean, New Earth?
It's been a long journey, as you might imagine, and this journey never stops, right? We always evolve, we always acquire new perspectives, new awareness. To me, building this new paradigm means ultimately coming from an inner place to create in the outer space. So we talk a lot at Top Tier Impact about bridging inner and outer worlds. I talk about it also in this TV series that Gaia approached me to create. It's on Amazon Prime in the US right now. It's called Road to Utopia. And we cover 8 areas of positive impact. We cover the entrepreneurs, but we also cover the whole space. And the way that I designed it is 4 episodes more with modalities and ways to build a more beautiful inner world, and other 4 episodes to create a better outer world. So the outer world episodes are on new forms of energy like fusion, circular economy, alternative education, regenerative communities. And the inner world episodes cover breathwork, psychedelics and consciousness, inner development, where we have Richard Ralph from the Gene Keys, and one more on longevity. So really this idea of we are creating this new paradigm of living that comes from a place that is as aligned as possible with being beyond our fears and our sort of subconscious drivers, right? It's a place of channeling who you really are, channeling this life energy. And that is what I hope to see more and more out there, for what we built outside in the world.
Yeah,
Wow, so much drive. Beautiful. How do you get inspiration for creating this series and this huge project, this huge business that you're running? How does it come to you?
Maybe I'll start with the series because it's a specific example and it's an interesting story. So I've been doing content for quite a while, just sharing the things that I see in impact investing and impact entrepreneurship, sharing them because I find them super inspiring. I get a lot of energy and inspiration from that. And I want to make sure that I contribute to bringing them to more people. I think we are so lucky here, and also for many who are listening, we're so lucky to be seeing these positive examples. But for many people, as we know right now, it sounds like general dystopia out there. And so to do a better job at making these stories relatable was a driver. And so at some point, as I was building Top Tier Impact, I was being asked and prompted by a few people, how about long form content, which means effectively longer episodes, like this Gaia TV series is like 20 minutes per episode. And I was like, look, I'm good. If something comes that really inspires me, that I really have to do, I'll do it. Otherwise, I'm not going to do it for the sake of it. And like last famous words or last famous thoughts, because a couple of months later or so, I got this whole download and this inspiration for Road to Utopia. And it was the typical example where it all comes through. It even came with a title, and perhaps in a way it came from various things I already knew because I was working in the space day to day. So it was kind of synthesizing it and putting it together. And then 2 days later, 2 days after I got this download, which by the way felt like a baby dropping from the sky and thinking, okay, well, I got to take care of this now. And I remember back then I was like, I know I have to do this. It just came to me. It's not me, but it came to me. And I'll figure out what to do with it. I'll figure out where to put it. Maybe I go on YouTube. I never did YouTube before. And 2 days later, Gaia reached out through a board member. And they knew about Top Tier Impact. They knew of our work. And long story short, I was asked to first put together a pilot episode. And then the whole series, the pilot episode did very well. We did it on the circular economy. And then creating the whole series, which was very much of a journey because I did it in parallel to building Top Tier Impact internationally and across different business lines. But it was definitely a journey, again, from an inner place and very, very much devoted to, I want to do this for the sake of all. I want to do what's best for everybody in the messages that we will put out there. So yeah, that was the example of the TV series.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds amazing. And just listening to how you described it at the start, it's like not only focused on the outer part, but also the inner work and finding a way to bridge them both together to create this new earth. And I found that many people who are on this path, either they focus too much on one side or the other. So what was that journey for you? Like, did you focus more on your inner journey, or were you kind of somebody who was more focused on having that impact out there in the world?
That's such a good question, and it's great to dive into it because often when people look at what we built with Top Tier Impact in the past 5 years, you would think that was the focus, right? And I was very focused on that. And in reality, it's almost the other way around. I was very much focused first on the inner journey and the inner path, but I kept on doing the things that I do in the outside in parallel to that. And actually, Top Tier Impact came very much as a consequence. It wasn't my mind saying, I'm going to create this business, I'm going to do this and that. I didn't even know I was setting up my next business. I actually created Top Tier Impact because I was looking at the impact space overall about 6 years ago. And I wasn't familiar with the umbrella term impact yet back then, and I came from a background of entrepreneurship and investing and technology. So for me, I just thought this is a better paradigm for our economy and our society. I need to do something to help take it more in the mainstream. I want to amplify this. That was it. So I thought it was this side project or side initiative to contribute. And it started evolving and it started growing. And at some point, this was about the time when COVID hit and I was in Asia. At some point, I realized that it was going to be my next business and it made sense. So that entire journey was a bit of a consequence of being focused on the inner path for various reasons and then continuing to also do this work. And why? Because I believe that continuing to do our, let's call them outside activities, right? Beyond the inner journey, it supports that journey. It accelerates it in a way. Because you have to face yourself. You have to notice and pay attention to how you're reacting, to how you're behaving in the world. So I actually think it's this fantastic feedback loop, right? You might say, oh, in theory, I feel this and I learned this and fantastic. Okay, let's go put it in practice. That's that. So that's been my journey for the past 5 years.
So you feel like your business has been the mirror to your personal growth journey?
That's a very good way to put it. Yeah.
What was the thing that was most surprising about yourself that you learned in this process?
If I zoom out and I think about the process and perhaps the changes as well, I remember how in the first year, in 2020, and again, I had made this decision of staying in Asia during COVID times rather than coming back to Europe, which was wonderful. But in 2020, the community part of Top Tier Impact was growing so fast. And it was a surprise for me because as I just shared, I didn't know it was going to be my next business, my next area of activity. And it was growing so fast. And because it's a network, it's almost like if you have 200 members, it's like having 200 employees to some extent in terms of like the activity, because people were so engaged. So every day I would get messages from so many people about doing new activities or ideas or suggestions. It was so much. So I think in the first year or the first couple of years, a part of me had to meet these different things. One of them was the overwhelm and understanding that actually all of these things, they are choices that we make because we choose how we feel at the end of the day. I believe we generate our feelings. For example, 2 feelings that I've had to face repeatedly in this journey, overwhelm and frustration. And I realized that ultimately, where is it coming from? It's my choice. It's something that I go into, right? Because I can be faced with the same situation and react in 10 different ways. And so that journey of really, really taking responsibility for how I decide to approach things and to feel about things was a journey that I very much went from the less aware about it, right? And so meeting in, that first year of Top Tier Impact, a lot of overwhelm and also a lot of, because of like people being so active, like several different patterns, like several different situations that weren't always straightforward, to where it is now, which is so decharged on situations that maybe in the past would be annoying, and it is just no longer the case. Sometimes it's no longer the case just because it passed, and you learn. Other times it's more like, hold on a second, what do I want to choose here, right? And so it's still very much in the journey of realizing it. And so for me, this has definitely been a big learning that I observed, and I observed myself evolving with that as well.
Would you like to share a little bit about the business model of having a network? It's really interesting on our side because we're building a network for facilitators. So I'm curious, how has this been for you, creating the network of conscious entrepreneurs and change makers with big budgets and with big plans, and how to bring them all together to share the vision and trust in your project? Do you want to share a little bit about the development and the early stages of the project?
So I'll start with the part about herding cats, which is when you say big plans, big ambitions. With Top Tier Impact and our members, like there's no sheep, right? And that's where you say herding cats rather than herding sheep, because everybody has a strong opinion. Everybody has their views. Everybody's unique in their ways, right? So that is like the number one part, I would say, and something that you navigate. I think in the early parts, it comes up more and constantly because a network is forming itself. You're forming a community and there's a lot of activity. And then eventually the culture goes deeper and deeper. For example, our culture, the values that we have, not just for the network, but for all parts of Top Tier Impact, is based on the 15 commitments of conscious leadership. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them. I really recommend these commitments because the base of them is taking these self-responsibility in all parts of life. And by the way, I find that taking responsibility is like a never-ending spiral. You can always find a new level of taking responsibility. You can always find a new area where actually you were being a bit of a victim, but you didn't realize it, right? You can always find more. So that's why I love it so much. And all these commitments they're based on a mix of ancient wisdom, modern knowledge. They're conscious, but they're also rigorous, right? I would say they're no BS. So that is the basis of the culture and what we come back to. And then in terms of developing the model, we started with it because, again, I considered it a side project. I designed it to cover its costs. So I said, for every X amount of members, we'd like to have a full-time person to help manage that. Because I actually spend my day-to-day side of activities more on the investments, on consulting we do, on other activities. And so I designed it that way. And I would say that something to be aware of is what I mentioned about the journey from 0 to 1 and the journey of the early stages of the network, because everything is forming itself and people are very active. So there is a lot of management to do around that. There is a lot of keeping on aligning people with that culture. Another thing to say about our culture at Top Tier Impact is that we say we're action focused and solution oriented. And these in the impact space is extremely important, because I came to it from this investment and entrepreneurial background. And it used to be several years ago also very much associated with philanthropy or nonprofit, which is great. But we said, okay, that's good. And we want to add the for-profit and the investment side. And we want to really own it, because we want to scale this, because we want to take it into the mainstream of how things are happening out there. And so these culture stating that, right? Like leading with that and saying we're action focused, we're solution driven, like this is impact without BS, like this is really about taking it into the mainstream, having also financial returns and positive impact, right? Like all of those statements, I'm not going to say they were disruptive, but it was taking a bold stance as well in the space. So I think you really want to stay true, inquire in what really moves you and stay true to that. And then you can infuse that in the culture.
Wow. Yeah, that's so much wisdom that you shared there. And I feel the thing that drew me to your profile when I first discovered it was the word impact, and just the fact that you want to have this impact in a sustainable way for businesses that are here to support the earth. And a few weeks ago, you were giving a speech at the 5th event, and you started it with a poem about a dystopian society where people who are not concerned with having an impact on the world or just sort of living their lives and what's possible and where we could end up. And yeah, I wanted to know, like, what kind of an impact do you see Top Tier Impact having globally, and what kind of impact do you feel you're here for?
So it's really nice that you bring up this sci-fi poem that I shared as part of speaking at the Fifth Empire Gathering in Sintra. Thank you. Because what I realized by reading it out, I had almost forgotten about the poem. It came again in very much of what you could call just channeled. In 15 minutes, I wrote the whole thing. And when you think about it, it's quite complex because it ties into so many different themes, so many different narratives. And so it just came through to me right before COVID. And when I was reading it at the Fifth, when I remembered about the poem, because I felt it would be a really good way to bring through in a poetic way the messages that I talked about as well in the speech before, after, in the panel as well, you know, these messages of how do we change our economic system for the better. And the thing that I realized reading the poem is that there are two types of civilization in this poem. Like we sort of have everything taking place 1,000 years into the future, and we pretend that things on Earth just continued on this linear, capitalistic, unsustainable, non-circular side of things, right? So basically we say we exported this capitalistic model to other planets, and we're playing a finite game, right? So I talked about infinite and finite games, and infinite games, they're, so to say, games, whether it's like a project, an activity, whatever it is, that is sustainable, right? So you can keep on doing it. It doesn't exhaust itself. And a finite game, in my opinion, our current capitalistic model is unsustainable. At some point, it exhausts itself because it runs out of resources, it runs out of support, whatever that is. And so we projected this civilization 1,000 years into the future, but then at some point, this civilization going out in space meets another. And this other civilization, if you remember, is very grounded into what's best for everybody. They are also very evolved. They have superior technology to us. But then we say, besides the technology, it's actually the mindset that is so much more advanced. Because they ask, what will you do when there are no planets left and you can no longer resort to theft? right? So they ask a question that's like, what are you going to do when your unsustainable game is over? That doesn't really make sense, does it? And I realized reading this poem that I left the question open of, are we going to be that more advanced civilization that is taking care of the wider space? In that case of the poem, the wider universe. It's taking care of everybody, right? It's not just thinking about itself. Whether it's all beings on Earth or whether it's like all planets in the galaxy, same thing, right? Are we going to be that civilization, or are we going to be the one that just keeps on banging the head on the wall and trying to do the unsustainable thing?
Yeah, that's the question.
Uh-huh.
And I feel like there's certain parts of our society that we've kind of grown past, so we don't like throw things in the ocean anymore. But there was a time when that was normal. And like, I like the idea of when you say finite games versus infinite games, because once you recognize how limited the finite game is, then you can shift away from it. But I think when it comes to capitalism and the way our economy works, we haven't yet reached that limit as a society to decide that this is enough. What's another solution? So I'm not sure if I have the answer to what a more circular economy solution would be to that. And yeah, this is the question that we have of this time.
Yes, I think there are so many questions that not only there are unanswered, but we haven't even asked them yet.
Right.
We haven't even gotten to the point of understanding, hold on, what's the question to ask and to answer? And that's okay. But that is part of the journey we are on. Because I love what you said about a few years ago, we didn't even know any better. Polluting seems okay. We just weren't aware. And now we are so much more. And that's something to applaud. I often say in the impact space, speaking in conferences that talk about these topics, let's acknowledge how far we've come. Because 5-6 years ago, when I started Top to Impact, sustainability, circularity, these were all side topics. And then they quickly accelerated into being mainstream discussions, right? Nobody hasn't talked about sustainability, climate, no large company, no government, just not possible. So we have come a long way. And yet there's so much more to do.
Yeah, and I love the way you talk about impact as well, because the work that we're doing with facilitators, a big core of that is also focused on the impact they can have on themselves and on their communities. And we actually created an acronym for impact that we use as like our kind of guide to guide people through the journey. So it's intention, mindset, purpose, action, co-creation, then thriving. So we take them through a journey of impact through the word. And I feel it really resonates with the work that you're doing as well.
Yes.
What is your question? Because you said that there are questions that we haven't even thought of asking. So what is your one question that you feel is the one that each and everyone should ask themselves in terms of their business, life, community, being sustainable, innovative, and impactful?
Well, before I get to my current question, I want to say that I love that there are so many questions I don't know yet, right? It's this adventure journey. Let's see, let's find out. But if I had to tease out right now a question that's top of mind that I would ask in general is, are you truly doing what you're naturally meant to be doing? Because I do believe that if all of us had been enabled, supported, allowed to do what comes naturally from within, then by default, we would have an incredible society. We would have an incredible way of living with each other, right? Because everybody would feel settled with, yeah, I'm on a journey, but I think I'm on the right path one way or the other. The path is never easy, but this path feels worth it, right? And unfortunately, in the society that we have created, and this is not just today, it's been built centuries upon centuries. Like it's, these loops that we faced, they haven't just started now. They started in so many places. It's like so many years ago, so many generations ago. And we're still dealing with them, and we will deal with them until we really solve them and feel them deeply. So I think this question of, am I doing what I'm naturally meant to be doing, is a very deep question, because you can keep on discovering more. You can keep on surprising yourself. But I think that ultimately, once you find the courage, the push, the support to start being more on that path, things start aligning more. And again, I'm not going to say, oh, everything is easy and effortless, because I think that by default, this life, this journey is about overcoming challenges as well. And we learn through that. That's okay. But it's going to feel aligned. And I think that living in a world where more and more people can do that, are doing that, is a much more peaceful perspective.
How can people even reach into understanding what they are naturally meant to be doing? Because as we get born and burnt. We get born in a pattern, in a box where all the answers are already inside, and all the life path has been written, and you're gonna do this and that, and then you're going to go to school, and then you're going to get married, and then you're going to get a mortgage and have kids and buy a house and all of that stuff. Where would you say there is a space for understanding, what am I naturally meant to be doing?
Yes. Few things in there. I think one way or the other, there needs to be that pattern break, right? Like there needs to be, exactly. You got to break through the box. Yeah. And that requires courage. And that, by the way, is where, I think we're so quick to polarize on what's good and bad, right? We have what we perceived in the moment to be a bad experience. We're like, this is bad. But then, maybe 1 year later, we're like, wow, that was incredible, because it allowed me to question certain things and evolve beyond that. And so typically, I think that it tends to be a threshold of pain where we're like, I can't be in this anymore. I can't do this anymore. It feels like a lie. It doesn't feel true. And I don't have the answer, but I'm just going to go and try to figure this out. And that's it. So you need to have that moment. And then in terms of how it happens in this society in general, I think this is where inner development and what we were talking about before with bridging inner and outer worlds comes at play, because that continuous inner path, whether it's like, with a specific modality you found in a door, whether it's a combination of different ones, or it changes, that supports you in that journey all along.
Yeah, the holistic practices.
Yeah, I love
medicine.
That you. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I love that you say that they're so connected, because I feel a lot of people who are more into working on their inner journey, they have this kind of feeling that maybe money is evil, and that, okay, we shouldn't charge money to do anything, and actually we should just sort of focus only on the internal work. And then there's people on the other side who are more focused only on the capitalistic side. So kind of bridging them two together and finding that actually they're all connected, and the inner journey will support you to have a bigger impact. It's a beautiful realization and work that you're doing. So I was wondering, how did that come about? Like, did you also feel like the inner work for you was a big part, and what specific modalities do you, because I know we've connected at ecstatic dances and you do other things as well. So curious about the inner journey for you.
Yeah, there are so many things in there. So I'll touch into a few and then I'll go into my inner practices. But I think that the path was very much of an external journey towards an inner sense of fulfillment that the external journey alone couldn't give. And so it was this gradual realization of things that I had to face and resolve within myself that I couldn't just resolve in the external world alone, right? And so that is what at some point brought me several years ago to say, all right, what can I find within? How can I really tackle things within? And it's been a journey of mixing a lot of different modalities because I'm inherently so curious. Like I'm always the person who's going to have a million questions about any random topic. You know, if it sounds interesting, I want to know, right? And I want to know how you relate to it, right? I want to know why you love that. Like what made you go into that? So because of this, it's naturally led me to want to both see and understand myself from different modalities and also understand those modalities. So whether it's a lot of somatic practices that I do, and these ranges from daily yin yoga to Vipassana. I did Goenka Vipassana a few years ago back in Thailand, and it taught me a way of being within the body that I apply in many other places. I apply it sitting with plant medicine. I apply it in my day-to-day, checking through my body. I apply it like wherever it makes sense, right? And this is also the multidisciplinary aspect that I think is super valuable because we never lived in a time where we were able to bridge from one side of the world to the other. I was blessed to live in Asia for several years. I love Buddhism. I think it always resonated with me. I remember as a child meditating on abstract Buddhist concepts without knowing, right? But it's always been super resonant with me. Taoism as well, Tai Chi, Qigong. I got to learn that from the Shaolin lineage and masters in that lineage. So these practices, and then suddenly being deep in the Amazon jungle with one of the oldest tribes there, and really doing the things that they do from a spiritual perspective allows me to bridge these words. And I think that we all have this incredible access today online, but it's just a mirror, right? Because we can use it in the most disconnecting ways, or we can use it to acquire a knowledge that was never accessible like this before. So I think that for me, it's been a mix of these very somatic practices, and then also paying attention. I think that's more psychological, paying attention on what's going on with me and really auditing that. Where do my intentions come from? I mentioned at the summit where I was speaking a few weeks ago, and you and I had a chat there, how these auditing of intentions is important and really questioning, why am I doing it? Where is this coming from? So I try to do that as much as possible as well. And it's never just one or the other, right? It's a combination. I think there are also fantastic frameworks out there. In one of the episodes of Road to Utopia, we have Richard Rudd and the Gene Keys. I think Richard is such a fantastic human being. Like we spent quite a bit of time together. He walks the walk, very much so. And so, you have frameworks that are actually such condensated forms of wisdom, like the Gene Keys, in my opinion. And even if you read someone else's profile, someone else's keys, if it's written with wisdom, it's going to give you universally good advice, right? So yeah, I'm always learning more and always mixing what feels relevant.
And that's really interesting. How did that drive you to working with big money energy? Because also there is big money scarcity in the spiritual communities. But personally, I see money as a big technology that allows big movements of energy and big shifts as well to happen. So maybe because the money energy is so big, sometimes it's used not in the most impactful, in a positive way, but also it can be. So what brought you to working with investment and working with capitals? How did you arrive there?
I'll start perhaps with a couple of comments on money itself and the energy, and then I can share my path in the investment space and working with capital flows, because something I learned recently by someone who's done really deep inner work that relates to money itself is that when you stop and think about it, money is the ultimate projection object. We project at money similarly to how we can project to someone else in relationships. But the difference is that when you project to someone, whether it's your partner or a sibling or a friend, they're going to answer back. There's going to be an exchange, right? And perhaps you're going to gain more awareness, first the hard way, because you're like, no, you're wrong and I am right. And at some point, like, you will start observing yourself from a different perspective. But with money doesn't answer back. So you can just keep on projecting at it. And so I have learned from someone who does deep shadow work from that perspective. So from the perspective of, what am I projecting towards money? And this has been something very recent for me, by the way. So it's not something that I did at the beginning of this journey, but it's something that I have discovered recently because I've been auditing as well and asking myself, like, how do I relate to it? Because I think that it's very different how we relate to money personally in our life, and then how we relate to what you called before big money, which would be, let's say, the capitalistic system or the flows of capital in the world. I think when it comes to the flows of capital in the world, I've always been in that space because I started my career in investing, even though I had been in entrepreneurship before and in technology. So I really dived in because I wanted to learn from it and learn, how does that world look like? I felt it would be a place that would give me a good understanding of how we're ultimately interacting and exchanging value on the planet. Like, what are the systems? Like, what's actually going on? And so just like I've learned different spoken languages growing up, because I grew up in Switzerland, I learned different financial languages, different ways of investing. For example, investing in startups at an early stage is venture capital. Investing in larger companies at a later stage is private equity. And I learned a little bit how and what makes capital flow. So that's one thing, right? And that allows you to perhaps zoom out and do some system thinking around how that can be changed, supported, improved. Like, how can we go about structuring things there? And then there is our personal relationship. And again, I think that personal relationship is a place where a lot of shadow work can be done as well.
Yeah. And when it comes to that personal relationship with money, particularly in people who are wanting to have this impact, do you feel like there's some kind of collective shadow that people have who step into this space? Because it seems as though a lot of people who I run into have similar issues around money on a personal level. And it's this feeling that it's actually here not to do good, but to harm the world. So maybe what I'm hearing is maybe they're confusing their personal journey and their personal feeling with money compared to this collective flow of money in the universe, and seeing that actually the collective flow of money is uneven. Therefore, I feel this way towards it. So
I would say, I would take a further step back and say, at the end of the day, money is an energy and it's a tool. It's a tool just like AI, which is the buzzword of the day, is AI. And it's not just a buzzword because we're all using it. I love ChatGPT. Let's put it out there. But technology in general is a tool, and money is a tool as well. And so the fact that we start putting labels on it is interesting, right? To stop and reflect. Why are we saying it's bad? Why are we saying it's good? And it's very understandable, right? Because we look at the things that are happening in the world. We look at so many things that we can say that that's just unjust. Like, why is that happening? Why do people have to suffer? And so then we're quick at labeling things. But again, when you step back, money is a tool. And some people relate to money with this idea of, that's my safety. And either like I need to hold on it, or I just need to keep making more of it. And at some point I'll have enough and I will feel safe. But that point never quite arrives. Other people polarize at the other side. They say, oh, it's bad. I feel shame or guilt or whatever that is. I don't want to be associated with the idea of someone who wants it. That's not me, right? So you either take it or you push it away. And actually in Buddhism, And in Vipassana meditation, you call this craving or aversion. And this, in my opinion, is at the principle of how we behave in life in so many different ways. We either crave something or we push something away. And both of those are not quite in the balance in the middle, right? Because both of those come from fear. So we either fear not having enough and take it, or we fear how it's going to make us feel. Or maybe we think money is about greedy people and I'm not a greedy person and I will feel so horrible if anyone thinks I'm greedy, so I have to push it away. Right? And so this goes back to auditing our beliefs and thinking, what assumptions have I made and does it serve me or not?
Yeah, it's at the end of the day, it's all about the mindset and what thinking patterns we have that are supporting us and what thinking patterns we have that are harming us. And I had another question to you that was about these thinking patterns related to entrepreneurship. Like you mentioned a little bit that your career path started in investments and then you felt like growing internally to find more fulfillment within, right? And how did you come up to creating this holistic, value-based leadership within your company where you can bridge both the grounded approach to business with spiritual approach to relationships and creation and also creating space for yourself within that?
So if I think about what we mentioned before of what's naturally coming up within you, what seems to be naturally your path and your drive, I've always been very entrepreneurial. I started my first little business when I was 11. It was just books and toys that I had, and I declared I was a grown-up, so my dad put them in the basement, and I was like, it just doesn't make sense to have them in the basement. I gotta move them, I gotta do something with it. So I started selling them in front of this large exhibition, and I had so much fun with it. So that was sort of like an early sign. And also, I've always been interested since a young age towards this whole concept of understanding how does the world work today, the way we interact as humans, the way we exchange value as humans. How does that work? And how can that be improved? So you have these two sides, like an entrepreneurial side and then these system change kind of thinking. And when I was at university, I got to dive more into that. And I still decided, hey, I want to start my career in the investment space because in terms of system change, I felt it would give me a good perspective of what's going on out there. And then eventually, after having done that for a while and having learned some useful skills, I was like, all right, but I feel driven somewhere else. I feel driven to something else. And again, initially my journey, I didn't know what that was going to be. So that moment in between where you feel lost and you don't quite know what's this new path because you feel that the old path just doesn't quite make sense anymore and you don't know yet, that leap of faith, I think it always has to happen one way or the other. And it's also not a one-off moment, right? I think you have it.
Constant jumping on the cliff and learning how to fly on the way.
Yes. I like to say jump in freezing water and get to swim. So that path is inevitable. But at some point, it started leading me naturally towards the impact space, started leading me to that self-inquiry. And then it kind of just all mashed together into something that made sense for me and keeps evolving like that.
And how do you find combining like sacred feminine energy together with leadership?
That's a great question. I think as women in business, especially this business world that was shaped by men for men, let's face that, that is how it started. We have double the challenge and double the opportunity because we have to integrate both the masculine and the feminine. If we don't integrate the masculine, we're in this male-driven world, and that's really hard. But if we don't integrate the feminine, we're not true to ourselves. So we're in a lie. So we have double the challenge of growth to face, but then we also have double the opportunity for impact, for change, for showing up powerfully for what we believe. That is how I think about it, and my journey has been in parallel on both sides, and like, how can I stay true to my femininity in all kinds of ways? And how can I be comfortable on the masculine side as well in this paradigm? And that never ends too, right? Because I keep on learning more.
Of course. And I feel that for many women, there is a challenge of having to step into this masculine and actually, without wanting, taking over these very masculine traits of like, okay, this has to be done this way, and delegating tasks in a very harsh way. And at the end of the day, it happens that we're losing this essence of being inspiration and being the creative force, and when we become too much the executors. So how is it for you? How do you manage to keep your balance? And when you have like whole days of meetings, for sure you do, and all this responsibility and pressure, how do you manage to cultivate your inner inspiration and Shakti?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that ongoing inner journey and growth, and having our practices and having the ways that help ground us in the body, ground us in our truth, both just for facing that kind of day and those tasks, and also to evolve. And I have to say that if I think back 5 years ago, I remember I had a phase that was super intense early in the business. So many people reaching out. I still didn't build much of a team, so I had to kind of multitask, do everything myself. And I remember showing up on calls one after the other and feeling so disconnected. I'd be there like, okay, let's get this done, from point 1 to point 2. And just zoom out sometimes. I remember that it didn't feel right, but it was part of it. And if I think about my day now, I have the chance and the constant choice of checking in with that. There are different days, right? So there are inevitably days that you get to the end of it and you think, oh my God, what just happened? That was really intense. And then there are days that are spacious. So it's a never-ending balance. And I think, again, that never stops. Like, it's this balanced journey of sometimes you swing more on one side of the spectrum, sometimes you swing in the other. But then what can make the difference is that you have that awareness of stopping and asking yourself, where am I? Am I here? And if I'm not here, why? What's going on?
And do you think that because of this awareness and this ability to merge both, women are going to take over the business?
Amazing question. Look, there is a whole new paradigm to be built out there, and this paradigm needs to be rebalanced, because it's not just us wanting to rebalance it. Nobody is truly happy with the status quo. And I think that, you could have made this statement 10 years ago or 5 years ago even, and have a lot of people saying, what do you mean? Things are working, whatever, right? Today, forget that. Like, everybody, one way or the other, knows that there is big change that is taking place now and will keep taking place. And by the way, this kind of moment is a fantastic opportunity. All the chips are up in the air. So as they gradually land back, which I think will take a long time, how do we reshuffle things, rebalance things, right? It's a big opportunity.
So what is your speculation about the future of business 10 years from now in terms of economy?
Very good way of going into the future. If I have to think about how that looks like in 10 years, well, first of all, let's start with the obvious that we're all talking about. AI is going to reshape everything. And once again, I think that AI as a tool, it's good to be on the side of, oh, it's bad or it's good or it's whatever it is, because we project to tools. Like we were saying before, talking about money, talking about technology, right? So it's really our choice how we use it. Now, leaving that to the side and how that is going to take place, because quite frankly, I think that thinking about where AI will be in 10 years is pure speculation at this point. It is going to be an ongoing surprise and journey. But if I think about as humans and how we show up, I think that it will drastically change in how, these 5 days work weeks that we inherited from the Industrial Revolution, 9 to 5, didn't used to be this concept that's taken for granted, right? Not even for schools. The education system shaped itself after the industrial process system, right? Because it was basically like, parents now are in the factory 9 to 5 during the week, so kids need to be taken care of like that.
Right.
One of the episodes of Road to Utopia talks about alternative education systems. We went to the Green School in Bali and talked with the founders about the journey, and we saw their methods of teaching to kids, making them extremely entrepreneurial and responsible for their environment, for what they study, for how they learn. But also we zoom back and look at the education system today. Like, why is it the way it is? Why are we thinking about producing equal industrial units as opposed to having and enabling every kid to be as unique as possible in line with who they are, right? So there are a lot of things that we have inherited and they're tough to change. So they've kind of stayed like that, but it's all up for discussion. So in terms of how we work, where we work from, and the culture we have, I think everything will have to change.
I feel that as well. And you've brought up a couple of times in the conversation today the idea of auditing yourself. And this is a concept that I'm familiar with. I do it in a way, but I'd love to hear your process for that. And also, if you were to audit us as a society and a collective, what would be your recommendation?
Oh, wow. That is a big question.
Yeah.
Well, let's start with myself, and let's start with saying that I don't have this formal structured process. You know, it's also a bit more flow in the sense that I pay attention to where I'm at, and I pay attention especially to where my intentions seem to come from. So that's the auditing, right? Am I coming from fear, or am I coming from love, expansion, and I will say also courage and vulnerability? Because often to do the thing that is more expansive and not out of fear, it takes courage, right? Because fear makes us protect, makes us grab, makes us hold. And to let go and take that step, it takes courage. So let's acknowledge that. And that's my auditing as much as possible. If I have awareness, when I have awareness, what else can I choose? And does it make sense? Ultimately, I think that always makes us happier. It makes us happier to come to that place. But yeah, it takes an effort as well. Now, if I have to zoom back on society as a whole, it's such a big one. But ultimately, just like in Road to Utopia, this concept of utopia, for us, it's not this top-down utopia. Let me tell you how it is. Let me tell you about this amazing world where everything works and we have decided that this is the best choice. No. Utopia, in Road to Utopia, as a TV series, is a full bottom-up concept. And it goes back to what we talked about earlier on everybody being able to live on purpose. Because if we work to enable a society where people can have the space, the courage, the freedom of being more on purpose, then this creation of various little utopias, right, various bottom-up utopias leads to the collective utopia, right? So it's a bottom-up rather than a top-down view. And actually these bottom-up systems, I think, are the direction we are moving towards, also for how we organize governance, how we live with each other. I do a lot within the regenerative space, right? And whether it's thinking about regenerative agriculture, management practices, investments, or ways of living in a communal sense, there is so much to do in there. And so I think that decentralizing smartly is actually how nature works as well. Nature is this infinitely smart, infinitely interconnected ecosystem that we have only started to scratch the surface of because it's had millions of years to refine its processes. We barely have had what as a so-called advanced civilization, a few thousand years at best, depending on how you define it. And so there is so much to learn in there. And I think that's the navigational direction.
Reconnecting to the flow of nature.
Yes, and learning from it.
Learning from it.
I fully agree. I feel we can really give this advice to any field of life, every being and every topic. It's just receiving the inspiration from the source, from our planet.
So do you feel the current way of living, the current structures would be open to this shift? Because it does involve giving up what they have as power to like decentralized when all the power seems to be centralized at the moment.
Yes. So this is not an overnight fun and easy process. Let's start with that. Now, something that one of our top tier impact members said a couple of days ago at our last Lisbon impact dinner for TTI, we were talking about the regenerative movement and regenerative investments. And he reminded us how ultimately a better system is more resource efficient, and a better system automatically replaces the old system, right? So replacing the old paradigm is not going to be this like force or convincing game of please follow nature because it's better for you and it's better for us. It's going to be more like, well, you're doing it this way and we're doing it this other way. And guess what? It takes us less time, less effort, less resources. It's just better. It's just more evolved because nature is a function of evolution. Nature constantly evolves and learns in feedback loops. So these better system that's more aligned with how nature operates will be more resource efficient, and ultimately it would replace what's out there, not with a fight, but just because it works better.
Yes, but it's not so easy because on the other hand, so many years ago, we already invented cars that work on hydrogen that could replace the fuel and the gasoline and all these pollution driven vehicle fuels. Yet the current structure and system is not allowing these eco-friendly solutions to come to surface because it's not profitable. Because what if we take hydrogen as a fuel for our cars, and then all the business around exploiting of the fossil fuels will just vanish, and all the people who are the richest people in the world, how are they going to get even richer?
But that gets us into a different discussion, which is technology replacement. And technology replacement, again, tends to happen when the new technology, in this case, eco-friendly technologies like renewables, are cheaper and easier because they're more effective. And that's the journey we've been on. If you look at renewables, 10, 20, 30 years ago, very expensive. So unfortunately, even though from an environmental perspective alone, it was much better, it would be technically the right thing to do, it still required a lot of input, a lot of time, and more cost, right? So it couldn't replace things as it stands. This is what has started to change now. And by the way, without going into a very long discussion about this sector, because I do a lot in this space, there are still, sadly, so many governmental subsidies for the fossil fuel industry, not just in the US, all around the world. This is something to address. So even though some people like to say, oh, well, renewables have been supported and these subsidies, actually, how does that picture look like compared to the incumbent? So the incumbent is not going to just step back, right? That's not what happens. There is always fight energy coming in. But ultimately, the replacement starts, and it starts the strongest when this cost and this resource efficiency is there. It's just working better, it's cheaper, it's more effective, it's much more environmentally friendly, so let's go with it. And then there is a reshuffling, just like everybody now with AI, we talk about these reshuffling of jobs and what's going to happen, and all these jobs are going to be displaced. Well, it's the same with these changes. Like, what is going to happen to people who've worked in this massive industry, the fossil fuel industry? They're not evil. They're just people like us who day to day have been doing their own job, and day to day they want the happiness of their families, their own happiness, they want their security. Like, there is nothing there that is foreign. So it's just about that replacement journey with all its challenges. But it starts taking place when it's the paradigm tilts.
I think that's an interesting point, because it's not like the person who's working at the company is like has these evil intentions to exploit the nature. It's more of the decision makers who decide where the company focuses attention. So is that something that as top tier impact you're looking to shift, is working more with people who are able to make these decisions at a higher level to shift their energy and where the investment goes as well?
I think today in the world, because of so much change happening, we have both a crisis and an opportunity for more compassion. And that compassion applies everywhere, because it's also not like, yeah, well, the people in the company, they're not evil. They're just trying to live their life, survive, care for their families. It kind of happens like that at the decision-making level too. Now, it's easy to say, well, no, because there are infinite resources there and therefore, but what do you know about the psyche of someone completely different, coming from a different place, a different childhood, a different background, different fears, different imprinting? We don't know, right? It's this constant translation journey between humans. So we don't know about that either. And so compassion is not about just being docile and nice. Compassion is the ultimate form of intelligence, of being able to relate and understand. And therefore, when you communicate your opinions and your preferences, you can communicate it in a way that can be understood and received. So from my perspective and the work we do at Top Tier Impact, also when we gather in places of influence and we gather people who can make a real difference, it is about truly understanding other perspectives so that we can translate these messages of doing things that are in like the collective good and align with the collective good in ways that land. You can use also frameworks, for example, spiral dynamics. I love, and we talk about it in one of the Road to Utopia episodes. But I think in spiral dynamics, we're so quick to say, hey, we all need to build turquoise organizations. But guess what? Building turquoise organizations requires people who have really integrated the level before that, which is this yellow level of I understand reality is not black and white, good or bad. So I can start reconciling infinite perspectives, which includes what we just discussed, right? The decision makers, right? The people that cannot do any better, but working in an industry that we know isn't helping anybody. All of that gets reconciled. Now, once all of that is reconciled, and our emotions are reconciled as well, because when we do that, we encounter all kinds of things. Anger, frustration, grief, sadness, fear, right? Once that journey happens, then we can start talking about turquoise level thinking. And from there, building turquoise level organizations, because otherwise we're just trying to bypass to that stage, which doesn't work either.
Right. Yeah, I love that you bring up spiral dynamics, because it's also a big part of when we started Conscious CoCreators. The intention was to bring that energy, and yeah, I think it is a case of a lot of people do bypass and feel just jumping ahead because that's the final level. Let's just go to the final level, but to reach that, it actually requires a full integration of all the stages before it, and part of that is the capitalistic side, but then also the environmental and focusing on the collective good. So yeah,
well, I feel a lot of
beautiful
golden nuggets coming up in this conversation, and I'm curious if you have one thought that you would like to share about the mission and the vision that lights your way, and how you find your daily motivation and inspiration to pursue this impactful work that you do.
Yeah, I guess that with all the things we touched upon in this conversation, if I think about that daily inner journey and practice, what I've done in general for my career and the things that we're building both at Top Tier Impact and then that I do overall in my engagements is actually about, okay, once we're there and we're committed to come from that place, what are we going to change? And so I'm constantly looking at like, what does it mean to change things positively? And I'm extremely excited about areas such as how can we bring more regeneration and regenerative investment in more places. You know, I think that one of the big failures of this economic system we've been talking about and criticizing a lot in this past time is that we haven't priced and given nature value in the way that we are all reliant on it, right? So nature has been given this value of zero in our economic system. And the roots of that are quite interesting, the culture and the thinking they came from, because some of that thinking came from a few hundred years ago, philosophers during the Renaissance, such as Francis Bacon, who talked about nature having a value of zero because of being infinitely abundant. He was also known to dislike women and refer to nature as she. So there are complex roots actually to how we got to where we are today. But in my opinion, to give nature value in our current system would mean that these issues like pollution, resource overconsumption, a lot of that could be addressed. And I think that is key, because otherwise what we are doing is that we're all looking left and right, you know, in this economic paradigm and going like, yeah, it would be better if you do that. It would be better if I do that. But I feel like nobody's doing that. So I will keep on continuing this unsustainable path, right? So if we can improve the system, it automatically improves the way you can show up. So that's my day-to-day thinking, and how can I play a part in contributing to that entrepreneurially and with investments.
Wow, amazing. Such a wonderful conversation today. Really enjoyed diving deep with you.
Yes, me too. I'm curious if you'd like to share how people who feel inspired by your work can work with you, and what is the model of becoming maybe a part of your network at top tier?
Yes, absolutely. We welcome all kinds of change makers. So whether you're building a company, you're a solo practitioner, you're curious about the impact space and you want to learn more and you want to surround yourself with people who are either also starting their journey or have been doing that journey for a few years, that is the place, the Top Tier Impact Network. So on toptierimpact.com, you can go to the network and community page, learn more about the community. It's extremely active because we're worldwide right now. So here in Lisbon, we have a chapter. I happen to be based here, so there's also a lot of activity I oversee. We have monthly dinners on different topics in impact and regeneration. We have panels and larger activities during conferences like Web Summit and other gatherings. And then we have 30 other city chapters around the world. But we also do a lot online, because since we are global, we really believe in connecting people by mindset and by area of interest, no matter where they're based, right? So you could meet that person somewhere in South Africa, somewhere in Asia, somewhere in the US, who is so on the same page and who you can create so much value together with. Right? And that wouldn't have been possible before. So even though we have this strongly local belief, right, of like localizing communities and economies and being connected with each other, right, building that sense of belonging, we also have this mindset and global value alignment of we are on the same page and we want this value to be exchanged beyond these borders that have been created. So that is what I would say is there for you if you want to join the network.
Wow, it really, really resonates, I feel, with our model for the community that we've been building with Shani, the Conscious CoCreators community.
It's really inspiring to see.
And it's really inspiring, yeah, because you're a few years ahead, and to see how this is pulsing and how this approach to bringing people together based on shared values and shared direction and mission and purpose, how this is a thing right now, and globally and locally. So I'm really grateful for your sharing all your insights and so much of your process and so much inspiration for the people to drink from, to take from. So thank you so much for showing up and for receiving the invitation. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I love the conversation, guys. It's so good to explore all these different rabbit holes. So we could have continued for a long time, but thank you for asking and the curiosity. Excited to be in the space together.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, and now we go to a beautiful celebration together.
Yes.
It'll be the opening celebration. So excited.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And see you next time.